Hello everyone, it's me, and today, Baby Yoda from Star Wars is actually older than you. The more you know, I guess.
Baby Yoda, do 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 do. Baby Yoda, do 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 do. Baby Yoda, do 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 do. Baby Yoda. Grandpa Yoda, do 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 do. Grandpa Yoda, do 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 do. Grandpa Yoda, do 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 do. Grandpa Yoda. Darth Vader, do 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 do. Darth Vader, do 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 do. Darth Vader, do do do.
Use the Force.
Darth Vader. Force. Oh, joking. Do 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 do. Force. Joking. Do 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 do. Force. Joking. Do 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 do. Force. Joking.
I always hated that song.
Hello, Internet. Welcome to Film Theory.
Oh my god, that's so cute! Hello Internet, welcome to Film Theory! Hello! Let's get started.
The show that takes the internet's most adorable meme obsession and then turns it into cold, hard, emotionless learning.
Please don't, thank
As
you.
much as we all badmouth the Empire, heading up an intergalactic government, it's gotta be a hard job. Set the retirement age to 55, and Yoda gets to retire before he can barely string a sentence together backwards.
Or do not. There is no try.
But if you set the retirement age to, like, I don't know, 550, Han Solo's never gonna see his pension. No wonder there was a rebellion against these guys. Now, in case you aren't hip with the kids lately or didn't trample your loved ones in your rush to sign up for Disney Plus, I'm talking about Baby Yoda, the tiny, cuddly, wubbly bubbakins of the new Disney Plus show, The Mandalorian. The baby version of a member of Yoda's species who is, in one episode, already the most endearing character in this franchise. Move aside, Porgs. Get the boot, Ewoks. Baby Yoda filled the void that you never could. Baby Yoda is like cuteception, but the kicker is that by our standards, he's not even a baby. The Mandalorian depicts him as a 50-year-old toddler.
Yes, this baby is 50 years old. Think about it for just one moment. Are you young or are you old?
Their age. That's all you can give me?
Yes, they're 50 years old.
By Star Wars standards, that would make Baby Yoda part of the silent generation. And by that I mean the one that came before the baby boomers, which, of course, in Star Wars were all the babies that were born right after Alderaan went boom! Okay, boomers, there's one less planet in the galaxy.
Okay, that joke is a bit too far. Literally too far. Boomers, boomers. Get it?
And listen, this topic hits really close to home for me because I currently own a toddler. You'll hear parents saying stuff like, I wish they could stay little forever, but half a century of diaper changes is something no one is signing up for. But all those diapers and memes got me thinking, 50 years is a really long time to be a baby, a relatively helpless baby. And I'm saying that as a human, the species with the longest adolescence on the planet. So how does this insanely long childhood happen? And is there any way that 50 years of tummy time could be remotely plausible scientifically? Well, I started researching, as I do, and it turns out that it's not just scientific precedent, but an explanation here for almost everything that we know about the entire Yoda species. That's right, understanding the biology of Baby Yoda isn't just a fun fact from The Mandalorian or me overthinking a sci-fi franchise, but it's the single key to understanding the most beloved character in Star Wars history, and why he, Yoda, by the time we get to the main series of movies, is pretty much the only one of his species left.
Wow.
I gotta say, between this theory and the last one I did over on Game Theory about Star Wars' Force being pretty much scientifically accurate, which if you haven't watched, you absolutely should after this episode.
Yes, Matt Pat was so young back then. Come on. This video came out in the year 2019 and right now it's in the year 2022. So it's 3 years apart.
I'm starting to think that George Lucas might secretly be a scientific genius. Almost. Let's not give him too much credit. So join us to take a look into the evolutionary biology of Baby Yoda and finally figure out why they're so cool and also why they're practically extinct. Before we open your biology textbooks to chapter 5, we need to clear the air on one thing. No, I don't know the actual name of the species Yoda comes from. But you know what? I'm in good company because George Lucas didn't either. George Lucas specifically didn't want Yoda's species to have a name and rarely sanctioned work that revealed information about their lore. So even though the Yoda species existed in places like Knights of the Old Republic, the video game, information about them does doesn't appear in anything that's officially canon anymore. So instead of spending this entire episode saying the word Yoda and having to clarify between whether I'm talking about Yoda the species or Yoda the individual member of that species, I'll instead be referring to the Yoda species as the Tridactyls.
Tridactyls.
Because their extremities have 3 digits, right? But bear in mind, that's really just a fan-made designation for all the members of the Yoda species that we're currently aware of.
Alright, so you're trying to say that 3 fingers, Tridactyls. 5 fingers, isn't it Pentatractyls? The more you know, I guess.
Which are just 3, honestly. You got original Yoda, you got Yaddle from the Phantom Menace, who just appears for a couple seconds, and Baby Yoda, whatever his name ends up being, from the Mandalorian. So with that bit of housekeeping out of the way, and with the very short list of actual known members of the Yoda species, what do we know about Tridactyls? We know that Yoda lived to the ripe old age of 900 in Return of the Jedi, which everyone else is surprised about, but he isn't, seeming to indicate that it's not really that big of a deal for him. Baby Yoda, who's just stuck with that name for this episode, I guess, is 50. But functionally, he's about a 10-month-old, if my kid is any indication. He's nonverbal, but he is capable of walking and getting into trouble. So we know as a Tridactyl, you get 900 years in the galaxy on the high end, but at least the first 50 of them are spent as a baby, which I guess leaves like 100 to make it through high school, another 200 years of living in your parents' basement, before finally getting your own apartment at the tender age of 300. Now, because we're working in outer space and in a fictional franchise, it's worth double checking. When they say that Baby Yoda is 50 years old in The Mandalorian, does that translate to years as we understand them here on Earth? And it appears like it does. According to Wikipedia, the Republic standardized its time based on Coruscant, which conveniently rotates its sun exactly once every 365 Coruscantian days, which are broken down themselves into 24-hour increments, and then minutes that are incredibly close to our own minutes. So when Yoda says that he's 900 years old,
So it's coincidence or just lazy writing? You know.
it's pretty close to what we think 900 years is, and the Mandalorian has every reason to be surprised that his 50-year-old Mark was still a baby. So, knowing that, it's time to talk about the biology. Having such a long development period is more than just an interesting evolutionary quirk, it actually tells us a lot about how Tridactyls may have evolved over time, mostly because it parallels a lot of our own human evolution. You see, most animals evolve to shorten the amount of time between birth and reproductive maturity so that they can go on and grow their population as fast as possible. But that's not the only successful evolutionary strategy.
It's like rats, mouse, rabbits.
You may have noticed that us humans have incredibly long and particularly vulnerable childhoods. When a baby giraffe is born, it can stand almost right away. They're so cute. Humans, on the other hand, not so much. It is taking months, if not a year, for a baby human to actually get up on its feet. So why do humans, the smartest animals on the planet, come out so useless? Well, turns out that the whole issue comes down to our brains. You see, our brainy heads and the fact that they're so fat have changed our entire course of human evolution. Our ancestors, who many believe emerged from sub-Saharan Africa, were among the first species of animals to stop walking around on 4 legs and start walking up on 2. Our brains were big enough that we were able to logic out the idea that it took less energy to walk on 2 legs, and it minimized our bald skin's exposure to the extremely hot ground temperatures in those African deserts. As newly bipedal people, our evolution started favoring other members of our species who could also walk upright. Good for us, natural selection at its finest. But
So you might think about it. The spine is positioned differently. I can sit upright, my spine is zoop. If I'm like a dog or like I'm a wolf or cat, my spine will be more towards zoop. Yeah. So different usage. Like for example, if I'm upright, I can take a weapon and throw, like spear, arrows.
there's always a price to pay for innovation. You see, as we evolve to be more and more capable of walking and running around on 2 legs, our bodies evolve to facilitate that and compensate for our changed center of gravity, primarily doing this by narrowing our hips. This, in turn, helped us to walk upright like champs, but now all of a sudden we had a problem. That big fat head of ours was literally too big to be born. Sure, we had ourselves a big brain, but now there was nowhere for it to go because our hips were too narrow to accommodate birthing a head that huge. So human evolution had to change again. As the theory goes, we started having babies earlier in their gestational period. Earlier, at a time when the baby was still tiny and smushy and helpless, which would be pretty darn bad for our survival except for one thing. The heads were still small enough to squeeze up on out of there. Still a very painful process, but now at least it was doable. And then once the baby was on the other end, there would be what's known as the 4th trimester, an extra trimester of development that
That's outside of the species body.
happens outside in the real world, where we as parents would have to take care of that helpless newborn because technically it still should have been developing in the womb. It just needed to be, evicted from its home before it was too big to leave its door. Now, let's take a look at our
Two unknown tenant mother.
friendly Yoda. What features do we see? Well, he's bipedal, he's small, with a disproportionately huge head for his highly evolved brain. He's got a short, highly efficient body with diminutive, narrow features, including his hips. Even looking at the basic character model, you can see how in order to procreate, the tridactyls would have to have themselves radically different proportions. You can also see how having a big brain is a huge evolutionary advantage. Humans are so far at the top of the food chain that we protect other members of the food chain. Tridactyls in the Star Wars universe are the wisest and most powerful Force users in the galaxy. But the downside is that they, like us, are essentially born too early, helpless for months, if not years, or until at least their dad makes them pay rent and their mom stops doing their laundry.
Okay, so what you mentioned is correct. We have to take care of the offspring for literal days, weeks, months, years, decades, centuries before they are even useful for the society in the first place. It's a huge long-term investment. Can't think about it. You have to bring up this child for the next 100 years before the child can be useful. A bit of a risk.
This theory continues to hold water if we look at infancy for humans versus infancy for tridactyls. In their first 2 years, human baby brains grow to 75% of their full adult size. We don't know if this is the same for tridactyls, but we do know that the proportions of human babies parallel the proportions of baby Yoda. Enormous head, adorably tiny body. Besides making babies hilariously top-heavy, these proportions also serve a function. In infancy, human brains command up to 87% of the total energy that the body uses at rest, meaning that even while sleeping, the body is diverting a massive amount of energy to growing the brain. Because of this, the rest of the baby's growth lags behind the head, where the brain is. This, according to the expensive tissue hypothesis. We can see that baby Yoda is an extreme version of this principle, with a wildly huge and merchandisable head and a teeny tiny body.
So you must think about it as expensive tissue hypothesis and super expensive.
Making me think that baby Yoda is an extremely evolved version of what the human race could look like someday. The process of evolutionarily elongating the development period is called neoteny, and after humans benefited from it, surviving when our relatives didn't, well, evolution didn't stop its role. Humans are actually still experiencing longer development periods now than we even did 10,000 years ago. The shape of our faces and heads are continually becoming less like our Neanderthal cousins by becoming flatter, less hairy, less oblong. Again, we share a lot of these same features with Yoda, who's small, flat-faced with an enormous head. But if human evolution continues to make our childhoods longer and longer, the question of course becomes, where does it stop? Well, it stops at Yoda. The problem with a long childhood is that a lot can happen when you're tiny and helpless. Eventually,
Barney the dinosaur become evil.
There's an evolutionary tipping point where childhood becomes so long that it actually leaves the species too vulnerable to survive into adulthood. Tridactyls could very well be the extreme endpoint of a species like ours. As the Mandalorian clearly shows, baby tridactyls, even 50-year-old baby tridactyls, aren't capable of taking care of themselves.
Pretty useless, pretty helpless.
Sure, they have impressive force powers, but very little control over them. Human children, similarly, are pretty darn helpless, and it means that we have to do things like baby-proof the house and make up all kinds of safety rules for kids. Imagine having to worry about that sort of stuff for 50 or even 100 years. It becomes extremely hard for the species to get their offspring to a place of self-sufficiency. And
a lot of things can happen within one entire century. One entire century for you to grow up, and one entire century for the entire empire to crumble down.
That's just the tip of the iceberg. Natural disasters, plagues, drone attacks from the Empire, all of those things are going to be pretty darn hard to avoid, but they become a lot easier to bounce back from if suddenly your species can repopulate quickly. But if all of a sudden you're spending 100 years or more to reproduce a single generation, I mean, you're just begging for the next Death Star to give you a little zap. Which brings us to Yoda. We know so little about his history, but what we're able to theorize is pretty darn incredible. He's practically the last of his species because of the evolutionary double-edged sword that he's dealing with. On one hand, he's one of the most highly evolved beings in the galaxy, but he's so evolved that his species can no longer survive. They're completely obscure. It's incredibly tragic, and no, we don't have any of the details about how the Tridactyls were wiped out, but that elongated childhood, that extended neoteny to the extremes of 50 plus years of childhood, that is certainly a massive contributor as to why. So incredibly, Star Wars, the series often derided as being space fantasy and not science fiction, turns out to be scientifically plausible yet again, so I gotta hand it to you, Lucas, I'm pretty stunned. No, I've tried to help you out with...
It's not just if you have like multiple different offsprings. If the female give birth to like 5, 10, 50, 100 children, doesn't matter, because the children might not even survive for the next 100 years. That's how risky it is. Risky.
This and the whole midichlorians powering the Force thing, but I gotta admit, still have some quibbles to level at you about the Jedi's recruitment practices. That one will be coming up pretty soon. We have some bones to pick on that front, okay, friend? In the meantime, if you didn't see the real-life equivalent of midichlorians and how they're actually powering the real-life Force in your day-to-day life, click the video that you see on screen right now. That'll take you to my other Science of Star Wars episode over on Game Theorists, looking at midichlorians, mitochondria, and how we're all just a little bit Jedi. In the meantime, remember, that's just a theory. A film theory. And cut.
Aw, cutest Disney princess I am. Oh, that's cute. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video together with me. It has been very adorable and cute in watching this video. And I hope that you learn a lot from this video as well. If you do like this video, please remember to like, share, subscribe to my channel, and comment down below if you have anything to share with us. Don't forget to follow my channel. Once again, it is like, share, subscribe, comment, and follow. Thank you all so much. And once again, that's just a theory, a film theory, and cut. And I hope to see you all in my next video. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Bye.